It was never in my life planned to be a rabbi, not even remotely. And I went to university to study economics, but then I realized economics is about, creating utility, creating things that improve people's lives. So you've got to look a little deeper and ask what really makes people happier, better, more fulfilled. So I moved from economics to philosophy. But in those days, in the late 1960s, at least in Britain, in Oxford and Cambridge, almost all the philosophers were atheists. So it kind of was challenging. And after my second year, instead of a summer holiday, I bought a Greyhound bus ticket and went to America and went right round America in search of rabbis who could deal with some of these questions. It was a really strange quest, but I met an awful lot of leading rabbis of all kinds. And they all, one name kept coming up in the conversation. A Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who was known as the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was the great mystic and the great Jewish leader of our time. And they always said, well, you have to go and see him. So I went to Brooklyn, where his center was, in 770 Eastern Parkway, and I went in and said, I've come 3,000 miles from England to see the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Could I have an appointment, please? And everyone there fell about laughing. They said, there are thousands of people waiting to see him, come back in a year, 5 years, forget it. And so I said to them, well, look, I'm traveling around America. I don't know where I'm going to be, but I do know I have an aunt in Los Angeles, and here's her phone number because at some time I'm going to be there. Well, I was in Los Angeles when the phone call came through on a Sunday night. The Lubavitcher Rebbe can see you on Thursday evening. Now, I had no money, and somehow I had to get from Los Angeles to New York in 72 hours. So that was a 72-hour non-stop Greyhound bus trip, which I don't recommend to anyone, but it was exciting, and here I met the great man, and, every few minutes his assistant would come in and say, leave, there's 100 people waiting. And he'd say, no, stay, stay. So we actually had a very long conversation. And I asked him all my questions, and he gave me answers, and then he did something very unusual and started asking me questions. What's Jewish life like in Cambridge? What are you doing about it? I didn't think I had anything to do about it. I didn't want to be a leader. And I kept feeling he's challenging me to go and lead. And actually, that, not instantly, but ultimately changed my life. And I realized a deep truth that good leaders create followers, but great leaders create leaders. And he kind of encouraged me to lead. Last thing in the world I wanted to do. But at several critical moments when other roads were open, I took his advice and he said, no, become a rabbi, train rabbis, become a chief rabbi. So really I was inspired by a very great human being who was both a great man of faith in God, but also a great man of faith in people. And that is what changed my life. How do you give people hope for the future in dark and difficult times? To my mind, we have to make a fundamental distinction that not enough people make between two words that many people think are similar, but actually quite different. One is the word optimism, and the other is the word hope. Optimism is the belief that things are going to get better. Hope is the belief that if we work hard enough together, we can make them better. It needs no courage, only a certain naivete to be an optimist, but sometimes it takes a great deal of courage to have hope. Now, given that Jews have a very long 4,000-year history with a lot of pain in it, no Jew, knowing that history, can easily be an optimist. But no Jew worthy of the name ever gave up hope. And the truth is, to my mind, the most moving line in religion comes from Psalm 23. It says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. If we are accompanied by the divine other and by the human other, if we know we are not alone, we can walk through the darkest night without fear. And what I say to young people is, yeah, maybe the world is looking pretty dark, but it only takes a little candle to light up the darkness. So when each of us becomes a candle, we light up the world. I've tried to make a difference in different ways at different times. So for 22 years I was Chief Rabbi of Britain and the Commonwealth, and we tried to do a lot of stuff. We built a lot of faith schools. We got young Jews to be more knowledgeable and committed than their parents had been. So while the world was getting secular, here was a little bit of humanity that was developing a deeper religious life. And that took 22 years, and that was great. But then when I got to be 65, thinking I've done this for 22 years, if I haven't done it now, I probably never will, so let's move on to the next challenge. And the next challenge really was to come to America, to travel the world and try and, spark a flame in young Jews around the world. And we've done that for the last 3 or 4 years. But of course, something else now has happened, which is exactly what you're engaged with, the internet and the social media. And that allows every single one of us to make a big difference. We can now connect with, at least half the people on the face of the earth, just like that. It's very open, it's not expensive. For the first time, influence has been totally democratized. So I'm trying to use the internet in creative ways to communicate spirituality, to communicate hope, to communicate ideas. The word rabbi means my teacher. So I suddenly realized this allows you to take the whole world as your seminar room. And that's what we try and do. In different ways, we're still experimenting, and we'll carry on experimenting. What is the great question? The great question that I've been meditating on since I was quite young is that, a lot of people find it difficult. How can we have faith in God? I never found that remotely difficult. What I found very difficult to understand is, how did God have faith in us? After all, He created us, and He could see all the harm we would do one another. And it upset Him very much. That's what the Bible is about. He's constantly disappointed with us, and yet He never gave up. So somehow God has more faith in us than we have in Him. Somehow He has more faith in us very often than we have in ourselves. So every time I feel low, I think, look, if God still has faith in us, can I do any less? But that is the big mystery. Can we finally, knowing all we do about the harm human beings have caused one another, can we, in that fullness of knowledge, finally liberate the better angels of our nature and overcome some of the dark emotions that damage us so very badly? Very often people who have suffered pain find release in inflicting pain on others. But the correct response is exactly the opposite. People who have suffered pain should be sensitized to the pain of others, and that should allow them to cure and to heal. And so it's only a little move, but it's taken the whole history of humanity so far, and we've still got a way to go. So that's the big challenge. How can we recognize? As it says in Genesis 1, every human being is in the image of God. But not every human being is in my image or your image. We meet all sorts of people whose creed or color or culture or class is different from ours. So they're not in our image, but they're still in God's image. So the big challenge is, can I see the trace of God in the face of a stranger? If I can, then I can change the world. Do Jews believe in an afterlife? Absolutely, we believe in it. One of the most fascinating things, though, in the Bible is almost nothing is said about it in the Hebrew Bible. All the emphasis is on life down here, not on life up there. And I think the Bible is telling us, yes, please, relax. There's going to be an afterlife. Your spirit will live on. But in the meantime, this down here on earth is where you have to make the difference. And because we know that however long we live, it's still far too short, we have to make every day count. So yes, I look forward to an afterlife, but I don't think about it terribly much. There was a wonderful man in our community, he's not alive anymore. His name was George Weidenfeld. He was a Lord Weidenfeld. He was a publisher, but he did an enormous amount of good in many ways. And on his 92nd birthday, somebody interviewed him and said, Lord Weidenfeld, most people when they get to 92 start thinking about slowing down. You're 92 and you seem to be speeding up. Why is that? And he replied, well, when you get to be 92, you begin to see the door close. And I have so much to do before the door closes that the older I get, the harder I have to work. And that's what I look forward to. The years to come down here on earth, and I know that the older I get, the harder I have to work.